Hi everyone. In today's webinar, we are going to walk through how to create a course in Navigator and then how to add content to that course. So the very first thing you need to do is log into your Gooru account. You need to make sure you have a teacher account set up, as course creation is limited to teachers and is not accessible on student accounts. So I've logged into my account and this is my landing page. It shows me my current classrooms. So classrooms are where I've got students enrolled and learning is occurring and data is being tracked. What we're actually going to work with today is the library portion of the site. So up in the upper right hand corner over here, I'm going to click Library, and that's going to take us more towards that content editor portion of the site. So on this next page that comes up, because I will be creating this course, I am going to click My Content. So this brings me into my personal library of content, things I've created or remixed. And when I say remix, I just mean copying something that exists already and editing it as if it's my own. Across the top here, we can see all the different types of items that you can create in Navigator. So it goes from the biggest option, courses, all the way down to collections and assessments, and then particular activity types, resources, and even questions and rubrics, so big to small. We're going to focus on course creation today, but we are going to be adding in some collections and assessments to show you what that looks like too. I've obviously been creating a bunch of courses, so I've got lots of stuff listed here. You might not have anything yet. That is totally fine. Once you start building courses, you'll see them appear in your library and you can access them the same way we did. So I'm just going to take us back just to show you one more time how we got here. The landing page is your classrooms. We're going to be creating content, so we want to click Library in the upper right-hand corner. Then we're going to click My Content, and that brings us to the library of things we've created, and it also gives us a chance to create new things. So before we actually build our course, let's take a look at these course cards. So each card here represents a course that I have created. So we can see there's different parts of this course card. We've got a thumbnail. Obviously in the thumbnail you can have text or not. It's an image upload, so it's totally up to you what you have here. I would recommend having a thumbnail. The default thumbnail is sort of just a gray screen, so to make your course attractive and engaging, I would encourage having a colorful thumbnail. If you have text in the thumbnail, a good idea is to make sure it matches or is similar to the title that you give the course. So it doesn't have to be an exact match. But you don't want to confuse anybody by having text on your thumbnail that conflicts with what the course is titled. So I can see I've got my thumbnail, it's colorful, it does have some text, and it matches the text that I have created for the title of the course. I can also see here that there are 3 units in this course. I'm going to show you how to add units. I can see a description or summary of the course, so this should be nice and short. So look here. This is not my best description because it goes ... and it doesn't finish. These are much better summaries or descriptions because they are all contained on the card. We will work on making shorter, more brief summaries, so all of that helpful information will appear. And in that summary, best practice is to talk about what type of content is in the course. So for this example here, Science Navigator. I can see that it is next generation science standard aligned, so I'm talking about the framework that I'm using. And it covers all physical science topics in the 6th to 8th grade band. So I just give a rough outline of what the course is. Here's what you'll find if you enter this class. If you are doing skills training, the same idea applies. Describe what skills are being trained, for what purpose, and if there is an established framework of competencies for that course, mention it here too. A little bit farther down the card, we can see this gray box, and what that is the framework. So before you've built a course, you'll have built a competency framework, and competencies are just learning standards. Best practice is to have one competency associated with one lesson. So an instance of mastery can be inferred if a student masters a lesson tagged to a given competency. So that all sounds like a bunch. We'll go into it in a little bit more detail so it's not so abstract. But this gray box here shows the framework to which the course is tagged. So I can see here I've got a teacher PD framework attached to this course. That should make sense. For my science courses here, I can see I've got middle school science frameworks attached. And again, the framework is just the grouping of competencies or standards that all of the different items in the course assess and are tagged to. All of that to say, to work on a course that already exists, you can just click on the card. You can also click on the little pencil icon. Both of those things will bring you into the course editor. You can preview the course to see what it would look like for a student by clicking on this play button. What we need to do today is create a totally new course. So the very first step to do that is to come over to the upper right-hand corner, this blue button that says Create, and we'll just click on it. And we can see all the options of things I can create. And you'll notice that this list roughly matches this list. So as I create courses or collections or assessments, they'll appear on my library page. So we want to create a course, so I'm going to click Course. Very first thing you need to do is give the course a title. If you remember back on the prior screen, we saw that the titles were short but descriptive. So again, giving information about what is in this course, but not so much that the text doesn't fit on the course card. You want to avoid vaguer titles like skills training. Well, what skill? You probably want to avoid, if you're in K-12, things like math. Well, what math? Is it algebra? Is it geometry? What grade is it? If you're doing professional learning, I would avoid a title that says professional learning. Who's doing the learning? What are they learning? So something like Navigator Teacher Professional Development is a bit more descriptive than professional learning. Or automotive skills training is more descriptive than just skills training. So I am going to work in the K-12 space. I am going to give the course title Algebra 1, and I'm just going to put school year 2021 to 2022. If you build a lot of courses over time, it can be really helpful to have the date range of when the course is created or used in the title just for your own sake to keep track of things in your library. So I've got that here. The next thing you can do is fill in your expected time to learn. So I'm actually going to leave that blank. And I'll show you as we build the course material how these data points will actually fill in automatically. However, if you have a course that has a designated amount of time, like a skills training course that is 12 hours, please just feel free to put 12 hours here. You can do it either or. You can allow the time calculations to accumulate and be summed up by the system, or you can type it in here. It's totally up to you. You can add a publisher if you've got an external publisher or source of the material. I don't, it's just me, so I'm going to leave that blank. And then the last thing you need to do is pick a category. So I am obviously working on a K-12 course for students grades somewhere between K and 12. So I'm going to pick K-12. But you'll notice you've got lots of options here. You've got higher ed, professional learning, skills training, community development, early childcare, so you have lots of choices. You just want to pick the broadest group into which your course can fall. So mine is K-12, so that's what I've got. The next thing to do is click Create. And believe it or not, you've now created the skeleton of your course. So I'm going to click Save, and I'm just going to take us back into our library, and you can see here is my course card. I've got no thumbnail, and there's that gray sort of default. As I said earlier, best practice, put a thumbnail in. Have it be colorful, engaging for the user, and again, if you put text in, I would recommend that you have the text and the title of the course align pretty closely so there's no confusion. I can see my name here, or the start of my name, since I'm the creator of the course. I've got no summary, so we'll add that on our own. And I've got no framework associated with it yet. So we've got a little bit of work to do just on the structure of the course before we can start adding in material. That's just the way I like to work. I like to have my course built with the description and the framework set up before I start adding content. The system allows you to do it in whatever order you want. If you want to create a course and leave it looking just like this and throw a bunch of content in there, that's fine, and you can come back and fill in these details later. You can also change things like the title, the description, the time estimated to learn, the number of units. You can change that over time, so it's not fixed. I just like to work sequentially, but again, the system gives you the freedom to create the course and its contents in whatever order is best for you. Like I mentioned before, to start editing the course, you can just click on the image here or the pencil icon. I'm just going to click on the image. And that brings me into my edit course. I'm probably refer to this page as a course editor. You can use these tabs to navigate to different parts of the page, or you can just scroll down. So there's different segments of the page. Information, which is where we are now. The editor, which is where we will be adding in content. Settings, and adding collaborators. So again, I can just scroll down and see those things myself. So this is the guts. This is where you will be doing your content creation work. I am going to start in the way I said. I'm going to add myself a thumbnail, a summary, and I'm going to do my framework tagging at the course level. To do that, I'm going to click this blue edit button, and that opens up this information section to me to edit. So I'm going to start with a thumbnail. And again, this is just an image upload. So if you create the image on your own, you can upload that. If you are using an image from another source, I would recommend that you either have copyright rights to the image or you use a public domain image. So I am just going to select the image that I created myself, and I'm going to add it in. One thing to note here is I've got the text on my thumbnail kind of in the top half of the image. So I'm just going to click Save, and I'm going to bring us out one more time. I promise I'll stop dragging you back to your library in a moment. But just notice here I've got my text pushed upwards into the upper half of my thumbnail. That's because only about the top half of the thumbnail is visible on the course card. So if I were really doing a good job, I'd probably make this even a little bit smaller so I could really see Algebra 1 here, but for now this is good enough. So just be mindful if you have text on the course thumbnail, you want to keep it in the upper half of the image. Okay, so I am back in my course. I'm going to click Edit again, and I'm going to add a description and a summary. So these two pieces of information can be the same. The summary is what we saw on the course card, so we need that to be nice and brief so we don't end up with those ellipses at the end of the sentence that leaves the potential user thinking, well, what is the rest of the description? We want it to be nice and brief, but also tell the person what is in the course. So let me type that in now. So actually I got to stop myself because I was about to add more description. And we don't want to end up with too much text. So that's something I always need to work on, is making sure the text that I pick is descriptive but concise. Here's what I have for my summary. This course covers all Common Core standards for Algebra 1. So I've mentioned the framework, I've mentioned the course or content type, and I've also mentioned the target audience. So I am then going to type in my description, which is a little bit more information, and this is viewable in the library searches, and you have a little bit more room in terms of text. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to start with what I used for the summary, and now I'm going to add in a little bit more descriptive information. So again, I've just provided a little bit more information to a potential user of the course, what it is. So I'm going to save. I am a very frequent saver. I recommend that practice as well. You don't want to lose anything. So I can see I've got those two items filled in, my description and my summary. And I am going to take you back out to your library. I know I promised I would stop doing that, but I just want to show you on the course card, I can see my summary fits nicely in here. So I've got the length correct. And now it looks like the only thing I'm missing is the framework to which I am going to attach this course. And we can actually see here, so I've got 3 units, 4 units, 4 units, nothing, which should make sense because I haven't built any units of content yet. Let's come back in and keep on editing this information section. Click Edit. I've got my info here. I'm going to pick K-12. That's the category I selected for the course when I built the skeleton. You want to pick the same category here. And what that does is it narrows down the frameworks that you can choose from. So there are tons and tons of frameworks of competencies and standards already ingested into Navigator. And we don't want you to have to sort of scrounge through all of them to find the one that you want. So narrowing down the category narrows down the list of the frameworks that you can choose from. So if I picked skills training, I would have a different set of frameworks to pick from than if I picked K-12. So I'm working on a K-12 course. I'm going to pick K-12. Again, earlier I said before building a course, it's most helpful to have a content competency framework already created. It's not necessary. So I said a couple minutes ago that you can actually do things what I would term out of order. You can add in a bunch of content and then go back and tag those content items to competencies later. I would recommend as a best practice to have the competency framework built first so you can tag each item you build as you go. That way you don't have to go back after you've created everything and tag things to competencies. Because our goal is going to be to tag every single item we create to a specific competency or standard. We want all of the data that your students or learners accumulate and gather as they work. We want all of it to be associated with a given competency or standard. I want to know how much time my students spent learning on a specific competency. In my Algebra 1 example here, I want to know exactly how much time my students spent studying resources I created for dividing fractions. And on the assessment side, I want to know exactly how my students scored on an assessment tagged to dividing fractions. So all of that to say, you can build things in whatever order you want. I would recommend having a content framework in place first. Sometimes just the timing and sequencing of things doesn't allow that, but if at all possible, I would have the framework built first. I'm going to come in and select my subject. So I am going to find math. There we go. I've got lots of options. So I said earlier there are tons of frameworks in here, lots and lots. So I am going to narrow mine down and I'm going to pick Common Core State Standards. So I've picked my subject and my framework. I'm going to add a specific course. So if you have a framework that is associated with multiple courses, let's talk about a skills training example. If you are doing automotive skills training, you might have that automotive skills training framework associated with a course called Introductory Automotive Skills, and then Intermediate Automotive Skills, and then a third course, Advanced Automotive Skills. You just need to select the course or courses that are associated with what you're building. So I am building high school algebra. I'm going to just check that off. So I can see it right here. There's my tag. We'll see these a bunch. I'm going to select my audience. All students is what I'm going to select. You have options to select students that might fall into different categories or teachers. So even in an instance where your students are adults, and it might be more helpful to call them learners, you're still going to pick this all students section if that is whom you are directing your information to. So I've got all students. You can type in a specific use case. And then again, you can add a publisher. I left that blank, so it's still blank here. But if you have an external provider of information, you should identify them. I'm going to leave the expected time to learn blank. If I had filled it in with 12 hours or 6 hours, that would show up here, but I'm going to leave it blank for now. And we'll see as we build material, this suggested estimated time to learn, ETL, is going to populate. And then once I'm done building, I can take the system calculated value and add it to these two fields right here. So I am going to click Save. And I can see I've got all my information filled in. So I don't really have any blanks except for these three at the bottom that I don't have an external publisher, and we are going to allow the system to calculate expected time to learn. So in the context of creating content, more information is better. You want to leave as few of these metadata items blank as possible. As much as you can fill in, fill in. Okay, so we have our information portion of our course card set up. I'm not going to drag you back to your library, but if I wanted to, I would just click back and we would see our little course card with Math Navigator Algebra 1, the description, the course title, and we'd also see that competency framework tagged in a gray box on the bottom part of the course card. Before we start adding content, let's just say I messed up. I realized I don't need to build this course, or I want to start over. I filled this in a way that I don't like. I just want to start fresh. You can do that. On this editor page, click the trash icon. The system is going to want to make sure you are really sure you want to delete your work. So if you are really positive, yep, I want to delete this. I will never want to get it back. Just get it out of my library. You'll check off these 3 boxes. So none of the links will be accessible anymore. None of the content will be accessible, and all of it will be deleted. And then type in delete. So it's like a double check. You got to check off these 3 boxes and type in delete, and then it'll let you delete it. I don't want to do that, but I just wanted to show you where that is. At any time, if you want to preview the course and kind of get a student view of what it would look like, you can click preview. And this little guy in the middle is linking or sharing. Let's scroll down to the next section, the editor section, and let's start building our content. This is the fun part. So we did sort of the housekeeping of building the course structure and skeleton, but let's actually get to build some content now. I should also mention, at any point you can stop and come back to this. So course construction can take a while. All you need to do is just make sure you save. And like I said before, I am a frequent saver, so you'll probably see me clicking it without me even mentioning it because I'm not realizing I'm doing it. Just make sure you save your work, and you can come back following that same procedure we did at the very beginning, where you log in, you click library, and then you click on the course, and you can just come back and edit it. I am going to start by adding units. I have a couple of options to do that. I can click this blue plus button, or I can just click create new unit. They do the same exact thing. I am going to click it. So it says unit 1. And I am going to go with the first major domain in my topic area. So I'm familiar with the Common Core Math Competency Framework for Algebra. I'm familiar with how those standards are arranged. The first unit is seeing structure in expressions. So that is what I'm going to call the unit. This is aside from the course overall, this is the largest level of the hierarchy. This is the largest level of grouping in the course. I am going to type in some big ideas and some essential questions. Again, remember, as much as you can fill in, fill in. It's much better to have all these metadata points filled in than to leave them blank. So I'm going to be lazy just for the purpose of our webinar here, and I'm going to type in what I shouldn't be typing in. Here is where I'd write down the unit's big ideas. In an ideal world, I would write down the 2 or 3 biggest ideas covered in this unit. Same deal with the essential questions. And the way to think about that is by the end of this unit, what questions should the learner be able to answer? And we want to avoid yes or no questions, because the learner should be able to answer tons of those. We want more of the how and why questions in the essential questions field. Like after really learning the material in Unit 1, what things should the learner be able to answer? Or in a skills context, what things should the learner be able to do? So I am just going to type again a lazy question here. And I'm going to leave expected time to learn blank again. And I'll show you as we add in content how these values accumulate. The last little box here is domain. So I like to think of domain and unit being very similar. At least in the context of the course I'm creating, I've got my Unit 1 as seeing structure and expressions, and that's actually the name of the domain in my course framework as well. So if I click on add here, this gives me our first insight into that competency framework. So once the framework is ingested into the system, we'll see the course on the left-hand side, and these are all the courses associated with Common Core Math. I'm going to select the same course I picked in the course information section, high school algebra. And then I see the next level of the hierarchy is the domain. So there are 4 domains in this course, or 4 big chunks of material, and I am going to pick seeing structure and expressions. and then I'm just going to add. So it's just another piece of metadata that we can add here. I'm going to click Save, and I've got my first unit created. So there's no content in it, but the unit is there. In our course hierarchy, we're adding the next level down. So we've got course, unit, and the next level down is lesson. So I'm going to click on my unit, and I can see a new option here that says Create New Lesson. So that's what I'm going to select. And to do that, I'm just going to click on it, just like I did with the Create New Unit option. And it gives me a very similar structure. Now I've got my Unit 1 titled. I need to title my first lesson. Okay, so I am titling my first lesson, Interpreting Expressions. So I mentioned a few minutes ago, best practice is to associate one lesson with one competency or standard. So I'm going to be tagging the material in this lesson to one single competency or one single learning standard. It makes it much easier for the teacher to parse out where learners are succeeding and where they're struggling. You can tag lessons to multiple competencies. It is possible. In my experience, it's better to tag one-to-one. So one lesson, one competency. That way you know for sure. The student scored an 85% in this lesson. Therefore, I can infer that they have mastered to a degree of 85% this single skill or this single competency. So I've given my lesson a title. So the first field here is description. I am going to be a bit lazy and just type in a phrase, but you should type in a description of the lesson. Again, guiding questions. So we had those larger essential questions at the unit level. Same exact thought process here at the lesson level. What questions in the how and why format should a student be able to answer by the end of this lesson? What should the student be able to do or say or know to show me that they've mastered this concept? So 1 or 2 or 3 questions is usually sufficient. And again, you can type in expected time to learn, but as we've been saying, I'm going to leave that blank and it'll populate by the system. So I'm just going to save. And now I've got my first lesson. As I mentioned before, I like to build things sequentially. I like to have my framework in place, then I build the course skeleton, units, and lessons. If you want to start adding content, do it. If I wanted to start adding my interpreting expressions content, I could do it. My preference, and it's not a best practice, it's just a preference, is to create the entire skeleton first. Meaning, I would create all of my lesson shells. I would type in my description and my guiding questions. You can have as many lessons as you want in a given unit. So let's say I've got 3 lessons in this unit. I've established those 3. I've got skeletons or shells of them there. I'm going to add another unit. And I'd again add my big ideas and my essential questions. So just like you can have as many lessons as you want, you can have as many units as you want. My personal preference is to build all of my units and all of my lessons first before I start adding in content. If that is not appealing to you and you want to build the content as you go, meaning create unit 1, create lesson 1, add in all the content for interpreting expressions, then create lesson 2, add in all the content for lesson 2, then create lesson 3. If you want to do it that way, do it that way. Whatever works best for you, the system is pretty flexible and you can take whatever approach you think is most effective. We have our universal icons here. Trash will delete everything. Again, the system is going to want to make sure you are really super positive you want to get rid of a unit. So it's the same deal as before. We're going to check off the 3 boxes. Yes, get rid of it. It's okay if I never get it back. And type in delete. Same is true at the lesson level. Let's say now I actually meant to put evaluating inequalities first. I want it to come before interpreting expressions. You can move lessons within a unit. Okay, so once you've clicked on the up and down arrows at the unit level, you can drag and drop the lessons into a new order. So I'm just going to move this evaluating inequalities lesson up 1, click save, and now they've been reordered. Best practice, and just out of an abundance of caution, I like to refresh my page just to make sure the changes stick. Okay, great. They've stuck. So they're there. I can change the order anytime. You can change the order after you've added content. It's totally fine. So if you've built out all this stuff and then thought, I really should have put this lesson at the top, you can follow the same procedure. Click your up and down arrows, drag it to the top. Just make sure you save when you're done. I've got my units, and again, I can build 50 units if I wanted to. It's really how you want to divide your material. I've added lessons to my units. So now I'm ready to start adding in my content. To do that, I'm just going to click on the lesson, and that opens up a menu beneath it, just like we had with a unit. When I clicked there, it opened up a menu beneath. Now when I click a lesson, it opens up a menu beneath. So what do you want to add here? So we've got some options. I can add from my existing stuff in my library. That's these first three choices because it says my collections, my assessments, my activities. We're going to start totally fresh. I don't want to add anything that I've already created or used. I want to create a new collection, a new assessment, or a new activity. I like to start with collections, at least in the K-12 space, and I would imagine in skills and professional learning as well. It's very helpful to have a collection before an assessment. Collections are a bundle of resources that you put together, like videos or simulations or text or files or pictures, that the learner can review and interact with before you assess whether or not they've mastered the content. So it's totally up to you. The system is not restrictive. If you want to put an assessment first, like a pretest, by all means, do that. It's just habit for me now to do a collection followed by an assessment. A given lesson can have as many or as few collections and assessments and activities as you want. So if you want to add in 6 different collections, if you can think of 6 different subtopics in evaluating inequalities, and you have enough resources to build 6 little collections, do it. If you want to build in just 1 collection and 1 assessment, do it. So that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to follow the 1 collection, 1 assessment approach. I am going to click New Collection because that's what I want to add. And I need to give my collection a title. Best practice. Try to keep the naming approach consistent across your course. So I am going to title the collection the same thing as my lesson. That is just a personal preference. I have found helps students be grounded in what they are working on in the collection because the same title comes up as the lesson title. It's not mandatory to give a matching title. Just make sure that your titles are related to what the collection contains. Again, informative, descriptive, but concise. So Evaluating Inequalities is the title I'm going to go with, and I'm going to create. And that brings me right into a collection editor. So before we start adding material to the collection, I'm just going to save. I'm going to go back 1 level of the hierarchy. And let's look at what we've got now. So I've got my course. I've got all my info, got the skeleton created, added a framework. I've got two units. I can add more if I want to. If I'm looking at Unit 1, I can see the lessons it contains. If I want to see what is in Lesson 1, I can just click on it. So I can see already that there's 1 collection in Lesson 1, and there's no resources in that collection yet. So I am going to go into that collection, and I'm going to start adding resources. Before I do that, I want to make sure all my metadata are filled in. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to update the thumbnail. This will be the default. Again, it's up to you if you want to leave this. I like to add in thumbnails. They do come up on the student side, so it just keeps things engaging. Same is true as before. You can use your own images, or if you are using images that you've found elsewhere, just make sure that you have the appropriate rights to them or they're in the public domain. So I'm just going to pick a picture here. So this is not my best example because it doesn't actually relate to evaluating inequalities, but let's leave that there as a non-example of what I probably wouldn't do. I don't want to have a picture that's completely unrelated to the collection title. I might get people confused here. I'm going to leave it there for now. The next thing I need to fill in is my learning objective. So this is sort of as the user or student or learner goes through this collection, what's the objective here? What I would recommend as a best practice, again, is to keep your learning objectives consistent. Get them from the same place, follow the same form. What I like to do is I actually like to take the text of the competency or learning standard and use that as my objective. And I will do that for every lesson and every collection and assessment in my course. So, to get that text, to figure out what the competency text actually is, I'm going to select my category, K-12. Just like we did at the course level, I'm going to select my subject. I'm going to select my framework, Common Core. And now I get one more level that I didn't get before of things to select. So at the course level, I identified the subject and the framework. Math, Algebra 1, Common Core. Now at the collection level, I get to pick a specific standard or competency from my framework. So this is why I recommend having a framework in place and ingested into the system so you can tag it as you go. I would recommend against having collections or assessments that are untagged. That means they're unassociated with any of your standards. There are no data that can really be generated from them because they're not associated with anything. They just exist in your course, but they don't tell you anything because you've not tagged it. So if I just left this untagged and I had kids working on evaluating inequalities, but I left it untagged, in my data, I would really have no idea how much time students spent on this particular collection because it's not tagged to anything. So let's go into the standards and we're going to pick what to associate this collection with. Best practice again is to associate each collection and assessment in a lesson with the same single competency. In some cases, your course or material might not lend itself to that. That is okay. Just be mindful that as you associate different tags or multiple tags with the same collection or assessment, you will not be able to parse out the data associated with them. So if I tag an assessment to 2 standards and I have a student that scores 50% on the assessment, I don't really know where the struggle is. Is it with the first standard or the second standard? So it's a lot easier to interpret the data if each collection assessment lesson is tagged to a single competency. And again, I've been using competency and standard interchangeably. So just think of a competency like a learning standard. So I'm going to click on standards. I get that same course and domain, and now I've got the standard level of hierarchy. Again, that's competency. Think of them as the same thing. So I'm high school algebra. I've got my domain is seeing structure and expressions. And now I've got the different competencies that have been ingested. So I wrote the framework, it's been ingested, and so now all these competencies are coming up for me to select. So I am going to pick my first competency here. If there is a box next to it, it means it is a competency. It can be tagged to a collection or assessment. I'm going to click it. I can see it comes up, it populates here. I've got the text of the competency here, so I'm going to cheat and I'm going to highlight and copy that text. Okay, and I'm going to click Add. So I can see now that I have a competency tag associated with this collection. And remember I said I'm going to take the text of that competency and use it as the learning objective. So I'm going to just paste that in. So I've got the objective of this collection is to have learners interpret parts of an expression such as terms, factors, and coefficients. I'm going to save here. Okay, and I see I have a tiny bit more of metadata to add. So let's come back in. I've got my category, framework, standard. I'm going to add 21st century skills. So again, it is best to fill in as much of the metadata as you can. So these 21st century skills are derived from 4 different sources. So I'm going to pick what's applicable to this particular collection. You should pick what's applicable to your particular learner. So things might be different if it's a student versus an intern or an employee or someone getting skills training or professional development. Just pick what is most accurate for your learner. So in this collection, my students should be mastering core academic content, and they will have some strategic reading going on. There's lots of skills over here that will come up a bunch if you are working with adult learners and learners in the skills and professional development areas. So I'm going to select these two, and now they're here. Expected time to learn, just like we've been doing, I'm going to leave it blank and it's going to populate as I go. So save. I've got the information portion of my collection set up, and now I can scroll down and I can start adding resources. So you can see here, a collection can contain resources and or questions. So I like to add in some resources and intersperse some questions. One thing to note is that every question that you put in a collection doesn't count towards mastery. They're just practice questions. You can still view the results if they are free response questions that require typing or uploading of an artifact. You as the instructor or course creator can still view that as the students upload it, but it won't count towards mastery or assessing their understanding of the topic. So I do like to include questions. It's not required, and I like to include resources. So I'm going to start by adding a new resource to my collection by clicking New Resource. And we have a menu here. So let's start filling in. So I have a bunch of options in terms of resources. There's really so many different types of material you can add to these collections to make them really rich and engaging and robust. So I'm going to show you 3 types. I'm going to show you a URL resource. I'm going to show you an interactive resource, and I'm also going to show you an upload. I have a URL. Let me just head over to YouTube. I'm going to grab this video URL, okay, and I'm going to paste it in. Now you want to give your resource a title. As I've mentioned previously, consistency is a best practice. However you go about naming and titling your resources, I would very strongly recommend you follow that same pattern consistently throughout every collection, every lesson throughout the course. What I like to do is type in the number of the resource, just so again the learner has some grounding and it helps orient them to where in the collection they are. So I like to give it resource 1. You can see all these other things I've added and worked on before. So this is evaluating expressions, and it's a short video. So again, you can title it whatever you want, but the best practice here would be to keep your title descriptive, concise. Just following those 2 main sort of tenets, descriptive and precise. So I am finally going to type in an expected time to learn value. So let me just pop back over to the video. I can see it's a 2-minute and 18-second video. So I'm going to say it's about a 3-minute experience. And given the URL, the system has already identified that this is a video. But you'll notice you can upload or link to web pages, interactives, audio files, images, and text files. One thing I will mention is if you are using open education resources or things that you find on the internet, just be very mindful of the copyrights and the type of license associated with the resource. So I'm going to click Create. Okay, and I've got my first resource. So we are almost done, but not quite. I've got one more thing I need to do here. So what I'm going to do is click on the resource. I can add a narration. So if you want to add instructions on how the user should interact with the resource, you can type it in here. So watch the short video and pause to try the practice problems. You can leave this field blank. It's totally fine. I'm going to click Save. So I've got my narration in, and you can note here you have different text options, expressions using latex, bullets, all that kind of stuff. One more step is I'm going to click More Details so I can see that the resource is rendering properly. One thing I would note from if you're sourcing from YouTube, a lot of times the video will be visible on YouTube, but it's not embeddable. So you always want to check by clicking More Details, I'll show you one more time, that things are rendering appropriately. So it looks good to me, it's in there. If it's not rendering appropriately, it'll probably just be a gray screen or a little sad face. In those cases, I would recommend that you find a new resource. Find one that does embed properly. Another thing that might occur, I'm just going to turn this on to see if I can show it to you. Yep. Is you might come to preview a page and it'll look like this. In cases where you see a resource rendering like this or telling you that it's going to link out, I would just urge you to be mindful of the licensing of the resource. I, for K-12 users, like to avoid linking out. I would like to avoid having my K-12 students go to an external page to view a resource. With adults and adult learners, that's probably a more viable option. For me, I like to have everything embedded. So if it doesn't render here or if I get this link out message, I will generally delete the resource and try and find one that embeds properly. Okay, so here we go. We have it. It's embedded. It looks great. I'm going to come down and I'm just going to add a little bit more information, a little bit more metadata to this particular resource. So I'm going to click Edit. I've got my title that I gave it. You should add in a description of the resource. And again, it's already been identified as a video. So that's not the best description I've ever written. I would be more descriptive if I were you, but at least for now, I have something here. Another option, if you're short on time, is to put the text of the competency or standard here as well. The next thing we need to do is kind of the important piece, is we have our collection tagged to a standard. Now we want to make sure each resource is tagged to the same standard or competency. So just like before, and this is going to become muscle memory as you do this a lot on your own course. I'm going to click K-12 because that's the type of course I've developed. Pick my subject, Math, Common Core. I'm going to select my standard. So again, I went from my course, domain, standard. I'm going to add it. If I want to shorten the video, I can do that too. All you need to do is identify the standard again and type in the start time and end time that you want. So if you have a big long video resource and you want to chop it down, you can use this feature. What I would recommend, particularly with K-12 users, is to keep the video resources 5 minutes or less. People lose interest after a 5-minute video, most of the time. If you are using content that you don't have control over, or it's content that's established and successful, especially in the case of skills or professional training, by all means, use the videos you have. If you are sourcing from YouTube and you really just want a chunk of the video, you can cut it down using this feature. So let's actually do that just to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to click K-12. Again, muscle memory kicking in. Math, Common Core, High School, seeing structure, pick my standard, add, and now I can type in the start time and the end time that I want. So I don't actually remember, so let's just go with, I want it to start at, I don't know, 24 seconds in, and it can go ahead and end at 30 seconds. So I want a whopping 6 seconds of the video. I'm going to click add. I can see I've got my time separated out here. So those are the only 6 seconds of the video that will play when the user sees it. I have a little bit more metadata to add here, so you want to add in your publisher. In this case, I'm going to put YouTube. You can also put the creator of the video, so that is Teachings in Education. So the publisher in this case is YouTube, and the creator of the video is called Teachings in Education. So I'm going to add that too, because I like more info. If you or your organization is the publisher or creator of the material, then just check off I'm the publisher. I do not want it to link out, so I'm going to make sure that's off. I'm going to pick the 21st century skill that is associated or accomplished by this resource. You can pick as many of these as you want. So this is mastering core academic content. And I've already added in my expected time to learn when I created the resource, so 3 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to click Save. Got all my beautiful metadata added for a 6-second video. I'm going to come back out. And I can see I've got my resource and I can see the tag. This is the piece you really want to make sure you have. And I know I've been harping on it, but we've got a competency associated with the lesson, the collection, and everything in the collection. And the same is going to be true for the assessments. So I've added a video resource here. I'm just going to show you 1 or 2 more ways to add resources. So let's click New Resource, follow the same procedure. Oh, before I do that, look here. See, suggested estimated time to learn, 3 minutes. So remember, I typed in 3 minutes associated with this resource, and I've got my 3 minutes populating here. So let's add another resource of a different type. I'm going to click New Resource. Now, instead of adding from a URL, I would like to upload a file. So if you have PDFs or Word documents or PowerPoints, you can just upload the file. So I'm going to click Upload. And you can either select to upload an image or text. So here are the valid file extensions. I'm going to upload text. And so I've clicked on text here. I'm going to click Upload. I get a menu of stuff to pick from my computer. Okay, so there's my PDF. So there it is, it's uploaded, and I'm going to follow the same procedure that I followed when I created the first resource. So again, this is personal preference in terms of how I've structured it by saying resource 1 and then the title, resource 2 and then the title. You don't have to set it up in that way where you say resource 1, resource 2, resource 3. However, I would strongly recommend as a best practice that you stay consistent in the way you label and title your resources, down to the way you capitalize things, down to the punctuation you use in your titles. Keep everything as consistent as you can. So resource 2, I'm going to call it Graphing Example. And I'm going to create. So here I can see I've got my resource 2 graphing example, and I've got a little hint as to what it is based on the icon here. Let's say I want to retitle this. So I don't actually like the title I've got, graphing example. It's not very descriptive. So I'm just going to click edit, and it lets me edit the title. Graphing practice problems, we'll say that. I'm going to save it. There we go. Now let's say I want to reorder things. Also possible. If I think it's probably best for them to look at the practice problems before the video, you can just click these up-down arrows just like we did earlier in the webinar, and that allows you to drag and drop and change the order. Best practice, out of an abundance of caution, refresh your page just to make sure everything sticks. So it has stuck. I'm going to switch it back just for my own purposes. And now I can see here I haven't tagged this resource yet. So that is super important. So let's get in there and let's tag it. So resource 2. I'm not going to add any instructions. Again, remember, if you want to add instructions to the resource, you need to type them in here. I'll show you on the student side what that looks like when they pop up. To add our tag, we're going to click More Details. So I will get a preview of my PDF. I'm going to give it a second to load. So I'm just going to come down here, click Edit. Again, I've got a text upload, so the system knows what it is. I should type in a description. I'm not going to type in a good one. I advise you to type in a much better description than that. So in a library search, you can actually find something based on the description using keywords. Just like before, I'm going to click K-12, Math, Common Core. I'm going to select my standard. Okay. I'm going to write down my publisher. Let's say I wrote this PDF, I'm the publisher. I'm going to add my 21st century skills. So this is again mastering core content, and there is some strategic reading involved. And I'm going to say this is a 12-minute exercise. Okay, if I scroll up a bit, I can see I've got my preview here. It looks good. It's rendering properly, so I'm going to go ahead and save. Okay, and I'm going to come back out. So now I've got 2 resources in my collection. I've got tags on both, and I can see my total suggested time has gone up to 15, which makes sense. I've got 3 plus 12, 15 minutes. So you can add as many resources as you like. Again, with videos, if you are working in the K-12 space, I would keep them 5 minutes or under. With adults and adult learning, you have a little bit more leeway. Same with the text resources. I wouldn't upload massive documents. Some users might be working on their phones, and that will obviously be really challenging to read if you've uploaded like a 400-page PDF. You want to keep your resources informative, but not overwhelming. So I can just go on and add more resources until my little heart is happy. I'd like to show you a question. So again, remember from, I don't know, about 15-20 minutes ago, we said any question that I include in a collection is just practice. It doesn't count towards mastery. You can still see the results as the teacher or content creator, but it won't affect the user's mastery. So I'm going to add a practice question, and I've got 2 resources. I'm going to add a question. So I'm going to click, and I go to menu. I'm going to give an expected time to answer. I'm going to say 2 minutes. And now I have lots of choices for question types. So multiple choice, multiple answer, drag and drop, highlight, true, false, fill in the blank, image selection, text selection, free response, and some scientific argument questions. These first 8 are machine gradable questions. So if you are looking for a totally automated experience for your users, pick one of these 8 types of questions. If you want students to upload or to write out a response or to sort of journal or keep a longer response, pick one of the bottom 3. Just be mindful that it will require an instructor to score in order for mastery to be determined. So I'm just going to go with our good old-fashioned trusty multiple choice question, but I encourage you to experiment with these. The instructions for each are included in the template when you open it. So I'm going to click Create. And just like I've got my resources here, I've got a question. So, same exact best practice is be consistent with the way you name your questions. So, I'm sure you can guess I like to have it be question 1, question 2, question 3. It's up to you how you title it. Be aware though that if you do not give it a title, the text that you type into the box here, it'll just take the first like 100 characters and make that the title. So I would very much recommend you avoid that and give the question an actual title and just follow some type of consistent pattern in the way you do that. So I'm going to type in my question text. Question text goes here. You can type in a bunch. You have options in terms of text editing and features like bolding. Again, you have your create expression, which really comes in handy for math or mathematics related topics. You can use all these latex text items. Bullets. You can also add in sound files and video files. I really like this feature. I think it's really engaging. So what you can do is you can ask a question that relates to a sound file or a video file, and it'll show up beneath the question. So I am going to just use our same video as before. I'm just going to pop it in. There's my link. I can add a question image if I want. Let's say I do. I'm going to upload a thumbnail. Again, as before, just be aware of the licensing of the images. There we go. I have an entirely unrelated image. I would stick to keeping your images consistent with what is going on in the question. Be aware as well that the image will appear below any videos you include. So we'll see what that looks like. It does become a bit redundant if I would either pick a video file or a picture, or none. So then you just add in your answer choices. And you can use advanced editing here again to get those text features. So let's create an expression. One, easiest math question ever, right? And identify for multiple choice. I'm going to identify the correct answer as 1. In some of the other question types, you can identify multiple correct answers. You'll get your instructions on how to use the question type right here. So I've identified my correct response. If you want to attach an exemplar, so if this is a more extended procedure or there's a specific type of work the user needs to do to get to the answer, you can upload it here or type in an exemplar answer. And this will show up for the user after they've completed the collection. So it won't show up right away, but after they've completed it, they can review how they've done on those practice questions. And if you attach or include an exemplar, it'll appear for them so they can review that as well. You also have the option to assign a maximum score. I'm just going to leave it as 1. For all the machine graded questions, I recommend you just leave it as 1 so they're all of equal weight. So I'm going to click Save. I've got my question and I'm sure you can see what's missing here. I don't have a tag yet. So I've got this tagged and this tagged to that same competency we've been working on, the same one I've tagged the collection to. So let's get the tagging done. I'm going to click on question 1. I'm going to click on more details just like I did before. I can see the question text. I can see my video attachment rendering here. I can see my little bird picture here. I can see my answer choices. Let's scroll down to that information section again. I'm going to click edit just like I have been. We're going to do category. And again, you could probably do this with your eyes closed now, but I've been doing math, Common Core standards. I select from my framework, I've got algebra, seeing structure, pick my standard or my competency, click add, there's my tag, beautiful. I'm going to add my audience in, so in my case it's all students. Select the depth of knowledge, so this is related to the type of thinking that's required to answer the question. So in my case, I'm just going to say this is a level 1 question, it's just recall. And I typed in my expected time to answer. If I want to change this to 1 minute or 6 minutes, I can just type it in here and change it. I'm going to click Save. I'm going to come back out to our collection. And I've got my tag. So all of the items in my collection are tagged to a competency and they are tagged to the same competency. So I'm going to just scroll up a bit. I can see my total accumulated time is 17 minutes. So I've got 3, 12, and 2. That's 17 minutes. So I'm going to type that in. Thank you very much, machine, for adding that up for me. I'm going to save it. Okay, so my expected time to learn is now 17 minutes. And before I take you back out to the assessment, let's just preview what this would look like as a student. So another best practice, or something I strongly recommend, is before you say something is done and finished, take a look at the preview. Make sure it looks nice and clean and rendered appropriately on the student's view. To do that, just click Preview, and it'll take you to the study player. So I can see my video resource. I can see those instructions I typed in. I'm going to minimize those for now. I can click Next to go to the next resource. That'll be my PDF. And then I can also move to the question. So here's my question text, the video I added, the bird picture I added. So obviously, probably not the best approach I took. See how the video appears above the image? It's kind of redundant. And the student can pick the answer. Click Summary. So this is exactly what the student will see. This is the report the student will see. So the student can see how much time they spent on those resources and whether or not they got the question correct. So I'm going to close this preview. It looks good to me. So now I can officially say, yes, this collection's done. I feel good about it. You can come back anytime and add more stuff or take stuff out. I'm just confident at this point it's rendering in a way that I am comfortable showing my students, so this collection is good to go for me. I'm going to pop back out to our course level editor. So I've got my course, my 2 units. I can see my 3 lessons. I'm told I've got 1 collection here. I can click in to get a better look. Now I can see I've got my little thumbnail, that weather map that wasn't my best image choice because it doesn't match evaluating inequalities, but I've got a thumbnail. I can see that there's 2 resources and 1 question. I'm going to very quickly take you into a new assessment so we can see what that looks like, and you're going to find it very familiar. So like I said before, I like to have a collection and then an assessment after it. So I like to give my learners a chance to review the material before I assess them on it. Assessments are what are used to gauge mastery. So the performance on an assessment is what the system will use to say, yes, this learner knows and understands this competency, or no, they don't. So while all the questions I included in my collection were just practice, the ones in the assessment are the real deal. Those are the ones that impact mastery. So just like I did with new collection, I'm going to click new assessment. I'm going to give my assessment a title. Again, be consistent in the way you title your assessments, all the way down to capitalization and punctuation. Just keep things consistent. It reduces the amount of external and additional work that the learner has to do to orient themselves. So assessment title, I like to, for K-12, write CFU, or check for understanding. That is an abbreviation that my students are familiar with, so I like to add that at the beginning of my assessment. And then I like to be very uncreative and just use the same title that I used for the lesson and the collection, evaluating inequalities. So my lesson, collection, and assessment are all very clearly associated with evaluating inequalities. I'm going to click create. Same deal as before. I can add a thumbnail, and we're going to get stuck with that bird picture again. Not that it's not beautiful, but that's going to be our thumbnail for now. Not the best choice because it doesn't really have anything to do with my title. Just like I did with the collection, I'm going to use the text of the competency for my objective. So I'm going to click K-12 because that is my category. We're going to go the same route we've gone: math, Common Core. And again, you're going to be working in whatever framework and area your course is in. So if you're in skills training, you'll be picking from the skills training frameworks. I just happen to be making a math course, so I'm picking from the math frameworks. So I've got my subject and framework. I picked my tag. I'm going to pick my audience. I'm going to identify the depth of knowledge of the questions I'm going to include in this assessment. You can come back and change this after you've written the questions if you want to. I'm going to pick my 21st century skills. I am going to leave my estimated time to complete blank, just like we did before, and allow the system to calculate that for me. And I forgot to copy the text of the competency, so let me just do that. And I'm going to paste that in for my objective. I'm going to click Save. Okay, so I've got all my metadata filled in, and it's the same structure as it was on the collection side. So instead of being able to add a new resource and a new question, though, my options in an assessment are just to add questions. It's the same choices. So you can add any of these, any number of these. Just be mindful again that the first 8 are machine gradable and the bottom 3 require an instructor to score them. And you follow the same procedure. So you create a question, you give it a title. Again, follow a consistent procedure for titling. Type in your question text. Type in your answer choices. Save it. And then I can see here I don't have my tag. It's important that we associate each question with the same competency, the one that we associated the assessment to. So I'm going to come back in, do that same action that I've done before. Okay, I'm going to pick my standard, my audience. I'm going to click Save, pop back out. Got a tag, looks great. You can add as many questions as you want. So I'm going to just save one more time just to be careful. I'm going to come back out to my course. And I can see now in my Unit 1, I've got Lesson 1 has an assessment and a collection. So they populate in the order in which you create them. So I created the collection first, and then it's followed by the assessment. You can change the order just by clicking on the little up-down arrows and drag and drop things. Again, I like to have a collection or at least a resource preceding an assessment, just to give the learner a chance to review the material before their mastery is assessed. So you just follow the same procedure and you can build in the content as you go. The most important things to remember are to provide as much metadata as you can and to make sure every piece of what you're doing is tagged to a competency. In order for the data to be useful for you, you need to have the collections, the resources, the assessments, the questions all tagged appropriately. That way, when you're looking at the data, you can see what work is associated with what skill or competency. So, very last step, as I can see, my system has calculated the total time for me that I put in, 18 minutes, fastest course ever. So I'm just going to type in 18 minutes. I'm going to take the system's suggested time there and save. I assume your course will be longer than 18 minutes, but for now that's what mine is. So I'm going to come back out to my library. You can see my beautiful course here. I can see I've got 2 units, I've got my summary, I've got my framework, and I can go back in and make whatever edits I want by just clicking on the thumbnail or on the pencil icon. Thank you.